television and radio are two major ways of reaching the American people with the truth about the Republican administration. There is a right way and a wrong way of utilizing television and radio time, when to buy it and how to use it. Carroll Newton's discussion concerns the purchase of radio television time. Mr. Newton served during the 1952 and 1954 campaign for the Republican National Committee as time buyer. Now, here is Mr. Carroll Newton.
Television will be more important in campaigning in 1956 than ever before. It is estimated that nearly 8 out of every 10 families will have TV sets by August 1956. And people who have TV sets consider television a very important source of news or information in following political campaigns. In a 10-state survey made in the fall of 1956, the television set owners among 2,263 people who were interviewed and who said they voted ranked television almost as high as newspapers in this particular. This was the question. In following the campaign, which one of these sources do you feel was most important in helping you make up your mind? The figures speak for themselves. Among TV set owners, 45% said television was the most important, 46% newspapers, and the balance scattered over other media. There are some tested principles in buying television for political purposes that will be useful. The first of these is this: buy television at times when the largest numbers of families are using their TV sets. It's not difficult to find out when the largest audiences occur. By and large, they occur between 7 and 11 p.m. local time throughout the country. Most television stations subscribe to one or another of the reliable services which measure local audiences. Such audience measurements can help you select the best times in your city. Ask for these services. Some of the better-known ones are the Pulse, Videodex, American Research Bureau, Trendex, and the Nielsen TV Index. Insist on seeing this survey material. The second principle: buy the best station in every town. Nationally speaking, the programs with the biggest audiences are pretty evenly divided between the NBC and CBS networks, with the exception of one or two very popular programs on the ABC network. However, if the city you are interested in is what we call a mixed market, that is, it has both very high frequency stations, channels 2 through 13, and ultra-high frequency stations, channel numbers above 13, you almost always find the audiences dominated by the VHF station. They cost more, but they deliver larger audiences at a lower cost per viewer in nearly every case. The third principle is this: people are not as interested in politics and in candidates as they are in entertainment. Therefore, the audiences you enjoy will be largely determined by three factors. First, the size and kind of audience looking at the program which immediately precedes you. Second, the audience which, week in and week out, normally tunes in for entertainment at the period you buy. And third, the attraction value of the programs on other stations which compete with the time you buy on your station. In the 1952 campaign, only one telecast produced an audience greater in size than the audience normally tuned in at that period, and that was Vice President Nixon's telecast on September 23rd. As you would imagine, public interest aroused by the immense press buildup made it an exception. Here is a typical picture of political audience. This occurred in the 1954 campaign of President Eisenhower's first telecast on October 8th. We preempted a program called Armless Brooks. You will note that the President's audience was less than the entertainment program the week before or the week after, about 20% less. Now, the audience to the average telecast sponsored by the Republican National Committee in 1952 was approximately 60% greater than the audience to the average Democratic telecast. Of course, we had the candidate the people wanted to see, but I feel sure the fact that the Republicans purchased times where large habitual audiences existed contributed substantially. Such preemptions cost money, but they normally deliver audiences at a substantially lower cost per viewer and result in a more effective use of dollars. This was true in 1952. Here's a typical evening schedule taken from a Thursday in October 1954. The figures that you see under the names of the programs indicate their relative popularity. Now, it doesn't cost much more to preempt a program such as the Ford Theater than it does to buy a program or buy a time such as you see at 10:30 on ABC with no network program. It will deliver you twice as much audience, in this case, in this instance, twice as much audience at a cost 1/3 less per 1,000 viewers. These same considerations hold good in buying television spots or buying television time periods locally. It doesn't cost any more to buy a spot between two extremely popular programs than it does to buy a spot between two less popular ones. And your audience can vary up to more than 150%. 20 seconds normally is the maximum length of time for spots between programs, and that's not much time. But you can get value received in terms of audience if you pick your spots carefully. Insist on seeing those local ratings. One more word about local TV buying. It's difficult to get local stations to drop their best regular network programs. It's even more difficult to get them to do so at the last moment. So, make your plans in advance and work them out with the station you use. You'll get more for the money that way. One other subject that's of great importance, and that is when you buy television. Here again, we can only state general principles, but these three observations may be of value. Just as interest in a campaign reaches its height in the last 10 days, so do political telecasts reach their largest audiences at that time. Audiences to National Republican telecasts in the last week of 1952 of the 52 campaign exceeded audiences to earlier ones by 20 to 50%. Second, a skillful local or regional build-up on the issue prior to the day of the telecast can greatly increase your audience and the impact of your program. A very good example is the before-mentioned Nixon telecast in 1952. Third, a lot of people make up their minds whom to vote for late in the campaign. The same study I mentioned before, made in 1954 after the election, showed that substantial numbers of the voters made up their minds in the last week or less before Election Day. And take particular note of the fact that 17% of the independents didn't make up their minds until the last week. They're a very important part. So, may I leave you with these final suggestions about your television campaigning. Stick to the principles of buying television time, which have proved their effectiveness in getting more audience at any given cost. Second, build up your candidate's TV appearances. It will pay off in audience and in impact. Third, dominate the TV air in the last 10 days of the campaign. Fourth, select a local advertising agency which is experienced in television. It will cost you very little more than not having an agency, and the time that they buy or that you buy through them will cost you no more. Work with them throughout your planning. They can be a big help in getting your money's worth.
Thank you, Mr. Carroll Newton. For further information on this and other campaign school films, write to the Republican National Committee, Washington, D.C.